Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast presented to you by Texas Pete. I am Connor O'Gara. Well, week 4 was everything I think we hoped it would be, just awesome games, and it was one of those rare weekends where it felt like the slate really lived up to the billing, and not just in the SEC.
Yeah, 100%. Well, outside of Colorado. But yeah, I mean, FSU Clemson was really competitive. I feel like I spent a lot more time this week watching other conferences. The Notre Dame Ohio State game was like the most Big Ten game of all time. Shout out to Ryan Day for just being furious at Lou Holtz at the end. But yeah, it was a great weekend.
If you're getting that mad at Lou Holtz, I think that's probably the line that we should all look at for the future and say, if that's your big thing coming off of a monumental win, is you're going to be upset at an 86-year-old man. To me, like, I don't know. I think we've gone too far with the disrespect thing. I've already ranted about that before, but it's like, what do you expect to say in that spot? And yeah, just a weird move by Ryan Day. Just go enjoy the win. Go enjoy the win. I do what you need to do internally, but yeah, strange move. Big win for the Buckeyes. We have 5 games that we're going to break down. Obviously, you know where we're starting. Ole Miss, Bama. Lane Kiffin is who he is.
Yep.
He is the guy that I think we've been making him out to be for the last year plus. He is a fun, really good coach who is never going to beat Nick Saban. That's...
Yeah.
Like, at this point, how can, even if you're an Ole Miss man, and you're deep down in your soul, in those places where you don't want to talk about, where you want to believe that Lane Kiffin is going to take you to the promised land, you watched that game on Saturday and you had that exact thought. You just did. If not now, then when? It was the question that everybody and their mother was asking about Lane Kiffin. How about never? Just how about never? I'm sitting here wondering, man, all the things that you could ask for going into a game, Lane had. He had every reason to win this game, and I thought he blew it. I thought he blew it. I did. Remember, in the preview pod, we outlined how everything that Ole Miss was through 3 games and everything that Bama was through 3 games suggested what you predicted. Ole Miss should win this football game. But Jackson Dart playing as good as he has in his entire career, that did matter. Pete Golding looking really good through the first 3 weeks for the most part, that didn't matter. Alabama's quarterback situation being a mess, that didn't really matter. None of it mattered. By day's end, all of those things that we talked about going in, they were a distant memory. And I don't care who's calling plays for the Alabama defense. Whoever it was, they basically just said, Lane, I know exactly what your offense is about to do. I know the exact adjustments I need to be able to make. Good luck scoring a touchdown after the first quarter.
Yeah. Really
disappointing. One of the more disappointing coach performances I think we've seen in the young season, which might seem unfair, but am I wrong here? That was an absolute dud from Lane.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're so far into this Lane Kiffin experience. I think that we all have this image in our minds of he's like this young upstart guy. It's like, no, like we are getting to a point where at some point all this crap that he talks every single week has to matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like he's bold in the wrong moments and he's scared to be bold when he needs to. Like, you can't play Alabama as conservatively as he did. He was like throwing screens right into man coverage. He was doing things that was just like, Lane, these guys aren't just going to miss tackles, dog. You have to go out there and beat them. And I think that Alabama just kept serving up to him on a platter, and he was just like, no, it's all good, man. I got to get these jokes off.
And look, I get it. He's going to be who he's going to be. At this point, though, that strategy is not working. You did not have to come out early in the week and say they have a different defensive play caller than what everybody thinks. It is not Kevin Steele that is calling these defensive plays. And by the way, Claire has opinions on that. Apologies if you hear her in the background doing her thing. But you're wondering, okay, so is Lane trying to get into Saban's head once again? And then you see this game plan wherein I thought Quinshon Judkins looked pretty good. And once again, in this game, that was mostly a 1-possession game for the majority of it. Alabama didn't go up 2 touchdowns, I think, until 12 minutes left in the game. The guy did not get the work that I thought he was going to. And instead of relying on him, it becomes the Jackson Dart show. And I kind of reminded why this guy up to this point of his career has been up and down. I declared my that I was falling in love with Jackson Dart last week. And this week, I'm kind of reminded, it's like when you hear those songs that people talk about like, we were once together and why did we break up? Let's try this
Yeah.
again. And that's how I felt watching Jackson Dart, because I was like, oh, this is the guy who still thinks that he can run through people. He had his helmet taken off 2 different times. And you're wondering, like, dude, what in the world is going through your head to not take some of these slides? And he wasn't effective as a runner. He only had, 6
No thoughts, just vibes, just running forward.
Dude, like, the fact that Dart and Judkins were held to 62 rushing yards on 25 attempts, and that's sack adjusted, whatever. Ole Miss finished with a total of 88 rushing yards, which for the number 4 offense in college football, just not acceptable. But the most frustrating thing, all that, you can look at this and say, yes, it was an offensive letdown, whatever. The lack of urgency in those final minutes, Will, I don't have a dog in the fight, and I'm sitting here yelling at Lane, one of the pioneers of the hurry-up offense as we know it in 2023. Lane, go faster. Why are you getting down to 7 and 8 on the play clock? Do you realize that you're down 2 touchdowns in this football game? It was like Bobo, South Carolina at Florida in 2020. What are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. Like,
you're like the meme of Walter White just screaming at his car window, like, Lane, you need 2 scores, Lane.
I just didn't get it. I didn't get it. And if there was an explanation there that I missed, all right, okay. But, man, just so disappointing. And you could look at the Bama game plan and say, all right, maybe they're selling out to stop the run. We've talked about that a lot with Quinshon Judkins. It's been kind of a theme, I think, so far of the early part of the season. When you lead the SEC in rushing, when you have more rushing yards than any SEC true freshman since a guy named Herschel Walker, yeah, people are going to game plan to stop you. Then where are the open spaces for these receivers to be running through downfield? Because those were pretty non-existent, I thought, for the most part.
Yep.
I don't know. Dart had 1 passing play of 30 yards in this game, and that's a guy who was number 2 in the country with passing plays of 20 yards. I thought he was pretty much contained, and, like, I don't know. He had that arm punt where it looked like he just got bored and threw it in double coverage. What was that?
Dude, that pick was gross. I was about to bring that up. Like, there are picks that you see, and you're just like, oh, I see what he was trying to do there. He's trying to give his guy a chance. That was, like, away from the direction of the route into the coverage. It was like, bro, do you just... You've been on my bookie? What's going on, bro?
Yeah, and I know they had some, they've had some issues that they've been working through at the pass catcher positions with guys getting healthy, coming back. It's been kind of a revolving door on that side of the ball, but still, just a really, really disappointing performance from the Ole Miss side. And I just did not understand that game plan. And if it was, okay, they're bottling up Judkins at the line of scrimmage, that guy then needs to become a focal point of the passing game to be able to get them going. 3 targets, 1 catch for 10 yards. That's just not enough. I hated it from Lane. I hated it from Lane. You cannot call out the source of Alabama's defensive play calling and then have a 10-point dud like that. I think do we need to repeat the Lane stat for those who don't remember it? Have we said it enough on this podcast, or should I say it one more time?
Let's do it.
I was texting with my guy, Brad Crawford, about this yesterday because he was like, yeah, and I remember there was something you had said about that in the offseason. I need to dial that one back. Yeah. Okay. So Lane, in games against Power 5 teams that have gone on to win at least 9 regular season games, in his career as a head coach, not just an Ole Miss stat, in his career as a head coach, he is 1-19 in those games.
Whew.
I'm going to say he's going to be 1-20 after the Bama one, because I'm going to assume Bama's at least going to go 9-3. Like,
yeah,
I'm probably going to go 9-3. But man, you're just reminded of it. He turtles in these moments. He absolutely turtles. So it sounds like I'm taking away from Bama, and I'm not trying to do that. I think even Bama fans would tell you that was far from a perfect game. Maybe it woke Bama up a little bit. I think in some ways it's fair to say that Ole Miss might have woken Bama up. I thought the second half, showing the way that Bama played, ran the ball really, really well. They stopped the run. So much more encouraging than what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Jace McClellan was excellent after a rough week at USF, wherein his snap count was, half of Roydell Williams' snap count. O-line wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for Bama. Kind of same with Milroe. What were your thoughts of his performance? Because the interception they threw in the end zone was terrible. It was so bad. Right. But I thought he did enough things, like that throw that he had taking a hit when he's hitting Jalen Hale on that spot where he does his best Rod Tidwell imitation and he just leaves up right afterwards. I thought it was take the good with the bad. That was kind of the full Jalen Milroe experience, or at least what I know it to be at this point of his career.
100%. Yeah, I think that's another, like, Jalen Milroe is who he is type of guy. I mean, the touchdown was super loud. The pick was super loud. You know what I'm saying? Like, that touchdown throw was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. That was a moment where everybody in the bars goes, you know, like, that incredible play on that touchdown. But yeah, I mean, I just think he is who he is. I think he's a guy who takes chances. I think he's a guy who can be turnover prone. But I think at the end of the day, you know, when you have an O-line that struggled the way that Bama's has, he's a guy who can at least keep the offense on the field when he's not turning it over. And I think that, yeah, the offensive line didn't look good, but they had a quarterback that at least could keep plays alive, which they haven't had so far. So, yeah, I think that he's definitely the right guy for the job. I don't think it changed my opinion of him at all, but I think that this shows how Alabama can win games with him.
Yes, this is the blueprint right here.
Mm-hmm.
He does this thing, though. I don't know if you've picked up on this, but it bothers me. A few guys I've watched over the course of the last, I think, few years have done this habit, and they've been able to work through it. And I think Milroe might be able to work through it. It's probably going to take something in the film room session for a coach to say, hey, stop doing this right here, right now. He does the thing where when he's rolling out of the pocket and he doesn't have a receiver downfield, he doesn't have the presence of mind to throw the football away, and instead he runs out of bounds and takes a 3 or 4 yard loss. And you're like, dude, those are valuable yards. You need that. Just throw the ball away. Throw it into the third
Just
row.
throw it away. Yeah,
you're way out of the pocket. You're not getting intentional grounding here. Like those plays to me show kind of that speaks a little bit to him not understanding the urgency of the every yard matters type mentality that you need to just have at this level, and why that makes such a big difference. But he did that a handful of times in this game where I'm like, you've got to stop running out of bounds to take a 4 yard loss when it's just not a given that you're going to get those 4 yards back. And this game comes down to inches.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point too, though, because I think it shows that, like, as mad as Saban might be at that type of discipline related stuff, Milroe is not changing it. Like, at the end of the day, the way he carries the football is a little herky jerky sometimes. Like, he'll, like, kind of start bringing it above his head, and it's like, whoa, like, keep that down, like, lock it in. And same thing. It's like, you know, Saban screaming at him at the sideline, but we've seen what happens when Buckner plays. So it's like, hey, he might just be able to keep doing that stuff.
Yeah, look, it's better than the alternative. That much I think we can all agree on after 4 games of this Alabama season. Of course, it's not an Alabama football game anymore unless they have a touchdown wiped off the board because of a penalty. That was, I mean, check that off on the bingo card.
Yep,
that's a given. That's going to happen every single time. Saban bragging about his patience because of the fact that he's had to see 5 of those plays this year. I tweeted out, this is the thing that Alabama does best. That is still undisputed. Somebody's tracking that somewhere. Touchdowns wiped off the board because of penalties. My CFB stats doesn't have that one just yet. I think they need to be able to update things to be able to track that because Bama's number one. They're number one. But how about the fact that, and Saban also bragged about this, about how, you know, it takes a lot of patience to get the football on the 1 yard line and then not be able to punch it in for a touchdown. That sequence for Bama fans was probably so maddening, where Ja'Cory Brooks, who doesn't have a catch this year, I didn't realize that coming into this one.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah.
How does that guy not have a catch coming into this year, especially after all the things we were saying after what he did against Auburn down the stretch to be able to lead that comeback in the Iron Bowl 2021. But anyway, that's a different subject for a different time. He has this blocked punt that Bama gets the best possible bounce instead of a safety where it goes into the back of the end zone. It goes out of the 1. That is, I mean, outside of a scoop and score, obviously, that's about as good as you can hope for. And then what was it? 3 negative plays right after that, and they have to settle for a field goal, like a bad snap, a Milroe like kind of run out of bounds, and that just bizarre to see Bama sputter the way that it did. But the good news, you responded the way that you wanted to in the second half if you're an Alabama fan. That's the type of stuff that you're going to have to do this year. You're going to win ugly. Don't worry about hitting 35 points. Don't worry about style points. I mean, I guess Bama covered the spread, so that's style points in itself. But, you know, the good news for Bama is you controlled the line of scrimmage in a way that you probably haven't all year. 10 TFLs, and did a lot of that without Deontay Lawson. Their linebacker went down with an ankle injury. He's been really good to start the year. And, you know, you're going to take the good with the bad with this team. That's just reality at this point. And the only good that was obtainable on Saturday was avoiding loss number 2 and making sure that yet another assistant didn't have the last laugh against Nick Saban. And that, I think, was accomplished pretty comfortably. That was never in the second half of that game. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I never really felt like Ole Miss was going to come back and win that game. I felt like once Bama took control, they weren't going to let it up.
Yeah, and I know that we've ragged on Lane a lot, but it's just upsetting how predictable that was because I feel exactly the same way as you. Like I was watching the game and I was just like, at what point do I just kind of get out of here? Because I was about to head back and watch the LSU game because it's like, yeah, Lane did not have a shot to come back, and like I said, he just has like all this bravado off the field, but then when it's time to make his guys believe, he's just kind of over it. So yeah, I think that Alabama can hang their hats on, like you said, the defense improved. They still have a factor that Clemson, we learned, does not. That it's scary to come and play in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You know, despite what happened with Texas, we saw an Ole Miss team just kind of crumple when the bright lights turned on, and Alabama still can do that to teams even at this present state.
I was going to ask this question if Ole Miss had won this game, but it doesn't really apply anymore. But Ole Miss, in theory, could have gone into that game next weekend hosting LSU in Oxford and taken a stranglehold on the SEC West with potentially wins against Bama and LSU. And to think that that was on the table for this team, and obviously it no longer is, I'm more of the belief now, after seeing that play out, that the West winner will enter the SEC championship with 2 losses overall, not necessarily 2 losses in conference, but at least 2 losses overall. And we will be asking the question about a West winner and their 2-loss resume as it relates to the college football playoff. I'd be surprised. I really would at this point, if anyone, because all of them have 1 loss now. Okay, everybody in the West and the last remaining unbeatens in the SEC, they're all from the SEC East: Georgia, Kentucky, and Mizzou, just as everyone predicted, of course.
As everybody thought, yeah, Mizzou powerhouse.
Yes, definitely should be in the top 25 in my opinion. I said it last week, I'll say it again. But I think that's the way that it'll play out. And look, I'm not predicting Kiffin to beat Saban. I just can't. The quote that AL.com had before. Lane said this on SEC Network. It made the rounds where he said, maybe this is our last time facing Bama with Saban, which is a weird thing to say ahead of this matchup. It's a weird, basically saying you don't know how many more opportunities you're going to get. They're not going to face off next year with the new expanded SEC. We're kind of TBD on what the schedule is going to look like beyond 2024. Of course, everybody takes it as, oh, Kiffin is predicting that Saban's going to retire and you got to take advantage of these. But I'm just not going to hold my breath on Lane beating Saban. I think he's had 3 juicy opportunities these last 3 years. And for different reasons, he has found a way to absolutely blow it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny too. Like we have this foil in Hugh Freeze who's able to beat Saban twice in a row at Ole Miss, and so it's like it's kind of right in front of you. Like, yeah, you might need to cheat a little bit to get the recruits, but hey, now the NIL is legal. You don't got to cheat at all. You just start paying people. So yeah, I think that's another part of it that we kind of talked about. But the recruiting has never really been there for Lane. I think he's done fine in the portal, but at the end of the day, if you can't match up with Alabama with the guys that you bring on the field, like if you need to have equal talent to compete with them, which a lot of these games have not even really been competitive, if we're being honest. Like this one sure wasn't in the second half, because final score and score at the time doesn't really inflect like how the game was going. Like we said, it was kind of over. So yeah, I think Ole Miss is perfect for Lane Kiffin. I think they're perfect for each other. I think that if you win 8, 9, maybe 10 games in a good year and fans are happy, that's what you're going to get with Lane Kiffin. I think he's shown over and over again that he can't handle a level of responsibility above that. So yeah, I think he just needs to stay there forever and keep losing to Bama.
I'll push back on that. It hasn't been competitive. Marler had the stat. I think it was like all but 8.5 minutes in the 4 matchups that they had played up to this point. Kiffin's teams, you're including Tennessee 2009 Mount Cody game.
Oh sure, that was a competitive game. Yeah,
I think for like all but 8.5 minutes, they were at least within 1 score of Saban. So that's kind of the crazy thing is, 2021 was obviously a different story. That game was over at the end of the first quarter, and that was Ole Miss is probably maybe Lane's best team of that group, which is, the interesting thing is that the 2 times that Lane has probably had his best teams, he has looked the furthest from being able to beat Alabama. In this game, kind of pick and choose. Obviously, I thought it was a relatively close game going into the fourth quarter, but you're right. There was a certain thing about the score that even though Ole Miss was down in that game, it just felt like there were opportunities that they missed in the first half that they could have capitalized on. The missed field goal at the end of the first half, I thought was pretty pivotal too, but just left it out there. And this is one that Lane's going to be kicking himself about, I think, for a while. Okay, let's talk Arkansas LSU. Will, this game was a blast, man. This game was fun. Yeah. This game was great. I realized something, and I'm going to talk about the LSU part in a second. I promise. My favorite KJ games are when he is trailing and that cape is on and he's ready to go. I don't think the cape was really on against BYU, but KJ had it locked in. And part of it was probably the LSU secondary forgetting to cover receivers. But nonetheless, I think.
And tight ends and running backs and whoever.
Hey, you want to get open downfield? LSU's going to make that happen for you. I said to one point to Lauren when I was talking at her about games, as I often do while I'm watching them, I said, this right here is why I love KJ. This is it right here. Like, even on a night in which I totally counted him out coming into this one, I said LSU was going to win this one 35-10. I thought the Arkansas offensive line was a massive liability. It was still a liability in this game.
They were trash.
They were not particularly good, and KJ was fighting against his own team in that regard. But, man, like, I think the fact that they come out as good as they did and went into that half with a lead in Death Valley against an LSU team that was feeling excellent after what they did against Mississippi State. To me, though, that's why I will always go to bat for KJ. Is you see the plays that he makes. He knows he's going to be up against pressure. He knows that he's going to have to keep his eyes downfield. The running game with Dubinion, it's getting better. They're doing some things well, but they miss Rocket. They don't really have much of an identity in the ground game. But like his willingness to take off with his legs, the fact that at this point of his career, he does the thing that I praised Jordan Travis and Bo Nix for, where he can stay behind the line of scrimmage and he can fool you with whether or not he's going downfield or whether or not he's going to run with his legs. That definitely impacted part of LSU on the back end. That play that he had to Luke Haas, where he hits him on the right sideline. That was a perfect example of an LSU DB eyes sucked in the backfield on KJ's mobility. And then he just goes over the top and makes a play. They had another touchdown that was wiped off the board because of a stupid holding penalty on Bo Limmer, who played better early on. But man, I love KJ. I love KJ, and I don't care who knows. Remember how we said in the preseason, I think you said this in the preseason, how when we looked at this game in week 4, we said, these are the two best quarterbacks in the SEC. This should be fun. And then coming into this one, we're kind of like, maybe it's not really going to live up to that. And it did. It did.
Yeah.
It looks like the two best quarterbacks in the SEC. Once they got going in the second half, my kind of football game. Wish it kind of would have ended a little bit differently. I wanted one more last-minute drive to see if KJ could put something together or something to force overtime.
I'm good on that one, bro.
Yeah, I'm sure you were in a little bit of a different standpoint. But like watching that as an LSU fan and knowing that you were against KJ, did it feel like you just couldn't put him away and he was the guy that Arkansas needed in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. He is a guy that I've respected for a really long time. And, I share your opinions on KJ. And I'm with you. I was hoping for, to see a great quarterback matchup. And I wish that we could have had a solo camera on KJ, because did you see like when they would cut to him in slow motion? There was one where he was like, come on, bro. Like in slow motion, there's one where like he's like walking off the field. He's like, what the bleep? Like looking up in the eyes. Like it was so funny because you could see like his whole team was kind of like, I'm not going to say against him, but there were so many moments where he was like, just don't false start, bro. Just don't false start. I'll get us a first down. And
KJ's eyes were great. You're exactly right. When they would show him on the sideline too, or the defense would let up a big play or something like that, and they would show his eyes just like roll back to the back of his head. His facials in that game were so funny.
And it's like you could tell he was just super bad. Like it was like it reminded me of like some great quarterbacks that I've seen where it's like, oh, the defense is on the field. He's just sitting there. He's like, come on, man. I have like 30 points on this LSU team. But yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. It felt like, the thing that was crazy about him, I'm going to break our rule and make a Cam Newton comparison, but it's going to be an NFL one. Listen, it's going to be an NFL one. Here's why. I remember these Saints teams that had this great pass rush, and they would get upfield on Cam, and I'd be like, we got him. He would take 2 steps forward. They would kind of crash into each other. And then it's like, oh my gosh, he has a 50-yard, just landing strip in front of him. And that felt like it happened over and over and over again. I mean, this offensive line is even worse than I thought they were for KJ. And the fact that LSU got pushed on every single freaking play, and KJ was still able to just get guys off of him, run sideways, keep the play alive. Like, he didn't throw off platform, he threw in time. And there was always someone open because the defense was so terrified of him throwing guys down.
He's so good at that. He has gotten a lot better because I don't even think last year's KJ would have handled what LSU threw at him and what he was working against. That was the type of game where I think we really saw the maturation. I realize we're talking about it in a losing effort, and LSU still found a way to win that football game, even though it was a lot closer than probably the vast majority of people, ourselves included, were expecting in that one. But it was just one of those days in which you're reminded, like, you just want him on your side. You want KJ on your side. He is always going to give you his absolute best. But Jayden Daniels, man, 2 consecutive games in which he played the type of football we were hoping to see him play this season. He trusts those receivers. He puts it in a spot where only they can get it. The Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas combination is looking as advertised, if not better. Brian Thomas, you realize this? Brian Thomas is like already past his previous season production in almost every category. I think he's 2 catches short or something, but I'm pretty sure in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns, he's already past that with another big game. All Bang the Drum team member. This is why we talked about this so much in the preseason of who's going to benefit the most from Jayden trusting this offense, having confidence in this offense, being willing to take that shot downfield in single coverage. It's Brian Thomas, and we're seeing that play out, and it's making LSU so much more explosive. And this team with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas has become so pick your poison. Those guys combined 13 catches, 266 yards, and 4 touchdowns in this game. They were nasty, absolutely nasty. That ball that Jayden threw in the corner of the end zone, back corner of the end zone to Malik Neighbors, I couldn't believe Neighbors tracked that down. I said as soon as it left Jayden's hand, oh, he overthrew him. Nope. He actually put it in the exact perfect spot because he knows his receiver that well. A little bit of 2022 vibes with the comeback, slow start, flip the switch. But I still think they are so much more dynamic in the passing game in these comebacks. And I shouldn't say comebacks. This is specific to this game. This is the first time that they've done something like that this season. But I still was really impressed with what they brought to the table because that's going to play. That's going to play everywhere. Every team that they show up against, and Logan Diggs is stepping up in the ground game, and they're looking a little bit better.
He's so nasty, man.
He's a good player, man. They missed him in that opener. Looking back on that, I don't know that he makes the difference in a game that was as lopsided as it was, but he has really kind of established himself as that dude. Josh Williams had a nice big running lane to run through as well on one of those plays. But yeah, this LSU offense is figuring things out. And maybe it was good that they didn't come into this game necessarily clicking on all cylinders, and they kind of had to dig deep in this one. Whatever they're doing in those 5:30 a.m. film sessions that Holly Rowe was talking about, it's working. It's working because they look scary good when they get rolling like that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as a hater, Connor, I have to mention that, the way that Jayden started off this game, is pretty unacceptable if you're going to be the best quarterback in the SEC. I think that early on, LSU definitely let Arkansas have a chance to get in. But I think exactly to your point, what makes me so happy about this is that something has shifted in the team dynamic. I don't know if it's the lack of booties there and there was an awkwardness there, but you can tell that this team is a little bit better at workshopping stuff like that. So those first 2 deep bombs that Jayden tried were so underthrown. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just doesn't have it today, but he kept going back to it. And that's the thing. If Jayden gets scared and he starts to play within a box like he did in the second half against FSU, that's a stoppable player. But whenever he's able to trust himself, get downfield, and we saw that over and over again. I mean, it's we've gotten to a point where throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors is basically equivalent to a run play because he's just going to Velcro hands, get that in. And I think that now that we don't have that weird inconsistency with the receiver thing, I think that matters because you have 2 guys in Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors that Jayden knows he can trust with his whole heart and soul and throw a ball up, and they're better than anyone at going out and getting it. So, yeah, I think that we're starting to see that confidence that we've been hoping for finally from Jayden Daniels.
I like that you can move Malik Neighbors all over the place. You can do so many different things with that guy, and it allows Brian Thomas to kind of be at his best. And you know that he's going to get pretty advantageous matchups moving forward as long as Malik is out there and he is healthy, because he is a difference maker. He's kind of become everything that people who are ignoring the pre 2022 Kayshon Boutte concerns. He's kind of become that guy in so many different ways where you put him anywhere, he's going to be able to make plays for you. And that guy is just such a difference maker in that offense. Can we talk about the bad though? Can we could talk about
Is
this.
it the defense, the whole one?
It's not the whole defense. It's not the whole defense. It's the secondary.
The D-line is so nasty, but they're just playing within themselves. I don't think they're receiving instructions from anyone to be that good.
Yeah, seeing Womack, the 5-star freshman, step up, and he's making a play with his helmet off to bring down KJ.
Man.
When you're bringing down KJ for your first career sack, all right, we'll recognize that. That's not an easy thing to be able to do. LSU secondary is an issue. It's going to be an issue moving forward. It's not a matter of will they get better. I think you're just trying to make it work with what they have at this point. Way too many guys running in big open spaces. It wasn't quite 2020 Bo Pelini levels of that, but there were some moments.
It was close, yeah.
You're like, oh boy, this is not gonna play well against teams that can actually, move the pocket a little bit and then stretch downfield. I was looking at the remaining quarterbacks on the schedule for LSU, and tell me which of these guys scares you the most, knowing the deficiencies that they have on the back end. So you've got Jackson Dart, obviously coming up next weekend, that game in Oxford. Then you have Brady Cook, the resurgent Brady Cook, might I add, who was throwing some darts in that game against Memphis. Peyton Thorne, who we're going to get to in a minute here. Jalen Milroe, Graham Mertz, Conner Weigman. Of those guys, who makes you think that he can have a performance like what KJ did, or even what Jordan Travis did in the second half of that game against FSU?
I don't think there's a Jordan Travis or KJ Jefferson style quarterback on the roster, or like on the schedule coming up. I think there are some different kind of guys. Like, for instance, like Graham Mertz, I feel like could be an issue because if the defense doesn't communicate, someone's always going to be open. He's always going to find that guy 5 yards down the field. So I could see something like that being an issue, but not the mobility. You know what I'm saying? So maybe lacking that escapability would cause Graham Mertz to get off schedule. So, yeah, I mean, I think that maybe Jackson Dart, if we get good Jackson Dart. But the thing is, like, I don't know, and not to go back to that game, but that game almost showed me that Ole Miss is not as good as we thought, other than Bama being better than we thought. So, yeah, if we get yesterday's Jackson Dart, not so worried about that either.
Yeah, if there was a 2022 Hendon Hooker on that schedule, a guy who doesn't necessarily have this all-world arm talent, but if you make a mistake, he is going to make you pay every single time, then I'd be terrified. But even as a Conner Weigman supporter through and through, I still look at that remaining schedule and I go, you know what? They might be able to overcome that, even if they're going to have their bad moments the rest of the way. There's no doubt about it. The chunk plays that they're going to let up are going to be frustrating. But I'm still looking at that going, you know what? There's not that one guy that I think is going to be able to pick them apart for 60 minutes. Now watch, Jackson Dart's going to have the game of his life. He's going to throw for 450 next weekend, and it's going to be Lane's signature victory so far. That'll probably
Connor, there's one clear answer here, man. Someone who can move the pocket and throw rockets downfield. That's Max Johnson, brother.
Right.
That's who we're scared of.
Yes. Okay. So let's get to that. A&M avoided disaster against Auburn. You could take that in a couple different ways. Okay. We talked about what a loss for A&M would have done for the conversation in College Station as a whole, specifically what it would have done for Jimbo Fisher, $76.8 million, Iowa notebook. You know what we're talking about here.
Oh, yeah.
Avoiding that number two, that second loss in September, it is just incredibly important for any team that's got a bunch of these former 5-star recruits. I think there's something to be said for it in this day and age of the transfer portal and NIL and tampering and all those things that go on with those guys. And if you're second on the depth chart, or if you're not having the season that you thought you were going to, you just always worry about that. You do. So
you got to avoid free agency in their position.
You have to. You absolutely have to. Go ask Clemson about that, by the way. They're about to see what exactly that loss number 2 in September is like. But avoiding that disaster within this game was just simply don't collapse when Conner Weigman goes out. And to be clear, Conner Weigman was not effective enough before he left this game. It was his worst start of the year. There's no question about that. Also, to be clear, Max Johnson came in and balled. He balled. Oh, God. We have so many of these weird moments with Max Johnson over the course of his career, which is now in year 4, which is kind of crazy to think about, where we think to ourselves, this guy is sunshine from Remember the Titans. That is exactly what we're watching on this football field. Ronnie Bass is just going to come into the football game and he's going to save the day and everything is going to be okay. And you just have these moments with him where you're like, this dude, how is he not getting more opportunities? It's very natural to say that because he goes into this game 2 touchdown drives immediately after all they had to that point was a couple of field goals. Such a cool moment for the Johnson family to see Jake catch his first college touchdown, and it's from his older brother, man. Like that you can never take that away from the Johnson family. I don't care if those guys never have another touchdown in their entire college career. They will talk about that forever. Absolutely love that. So cool. Very, very happy for them. The most impressive play of the game, though, that throw and catch that Max Johnson and Evan Stewart had. Unreal. We had some highlight reel catches between that and the Ricky Pearsall grab. I thought the Ricky Pearsall Odell Beckham catch was insane, absolutely insane. And we're not going to talk about Florida, but we had a great weekend of catches in the SEC.
That guy's been all bang the drum team forever. Yeah, if you don't know Ricky Pearsall, he's been sneaky good for like 3 years.
He has been. I know Chris Doring's that's been on his all bang the drum team. I was not as high on him coming into the year, but seeing what that guy has become, definitely a difference maker. We'll talk about him with that matchup as it relates to Kentucky because that's going to be really interesting with Maxwell Harrison trying to shadow him, I would assume. We'll get to that eventually. That throw and catch, though, to me was just like, man, think about the chemistry, how hard it is. You're Evan Stewart. You're a second-year player. You're going to get popped on that play. If you have any lapse in your here's a better way to say this. You're going 40 yards downfield. Your head's probably going up and down, and you're catching that between 2 defenders. And if that ball is anything but perfect, and if you have any ounce of a lack of focus, you're dropping that football every single time. And it was incredible to watch that throw and catch, something that we have not seen a lot pre-Robert Patrick Petrino at A&M. That has been kind of few and far between. But the question that some might be asking, you might be asking, so is Max Johnson the guy now?
I mean, he's not the guy. I know.
He's not the guy. And look, we don't know what it's going to look like for Conner Weigman. All we know is that Jimbo said that X-rays were negative. But here's what should be more about. Max Johnson's one of the best insurance policies any team can have. Any team. It is so rare to have someone with that kind of SEC resume just available in case your starter goes down, in case your former 5-star quarterback recruit goes down. And you should feel good if you're an A&M fan knowing that you have Max Johnson to turn to in this offense, because he looked comfortable. And I know he leaves some throws out there. We kind of know the limitations of Max Johnson at this stage of his career, but seeing how poised he was, it's just not a given. It's not a given that you're going to have a guy that's ready to come in. And it just feels like more than anybody in the SEC, Max Johnson has come in and done that. I think he's done that in each of his 4 seasons. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here. He's had
he's like interim. He's like interim Coach O. He's like, look, all right, when it's time when the game plan hits the floor, you need somebody to just scrap. Max Johnson's your guy.
He just always has a knack to be able to do that. So nice win for A&M, even though it was kind of weird given the circumstances of it, and it felt like a slow start offensively. On the Auburn
let me say this real quick about Max, because I actually started to say something about him on the last podcast. I'm glad I didn't, because I was going to say, well, he transferred, and how's that working out, basically, because he was stuck behind Weigman. Because at the end of the day, I mean, with the up-and-down quarterback play we've seen specifically yesterday and throughout the entire season in the SEC, he clearly is better than many SEC starting quarterbacks, talking about Max Johnson. So, yeah, I'm glad that he got a chance to ball. And like you said, throwing a touchdown to your brother is like a memory you'll never forget. And in that moment, I was like, wow, I got cold takes. I see how special that is. And, hopefully, obviously, it's kind of a weird setup where Weigman's like a little bit younger than him. But I do hope we get to keep seeing him somewhere because he's electric when he's good.
He is. He really is. He could have played on the other sideline. There's no doubt about that. How many Auburn fans are like, wait a minute. Yeah. A&M's got 2 quarterbacks better than our best quarterback, or better than our best 2 quarterbacks, because on the Auburn side, it was bad. It was really bad.
Or Tennessee could get him and just start him in the swamp.
That would work.
A one-time start.
Yes. Hey, if a one-game deal, what does that NIL contract look like? pretty sizable for Tennessee, I would imagine. Look, let's just Max Johnson tour the SEC. I'm all for that. The Auburn side, though, this was a pretty significant setback. I thought after a 3-0
tough scene,
start,
as the kids call it.
Very tough scene. I thought for game number 1 of Hugh Freeze back in the SEC. So where should we start here? Where should we start? There's a lot of places you can go. How about the 2 yards of offense that Auburn had in the third quarter? Pivotal time. Third quarter.
To start, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the problem, I would guess.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say there aren't a whole lot of teams who have had 2 yards of offense in the third quarter who have won an SEC West road game. I don't know the numbers, but it's low. It's very, very low. How about Peyton Thorne having 3.7 yards per attempt and taking 5 sacks in this one? I think Auburn took like 7 total or something, whatever it was. Not great. Or perhaps an even worse stat than all of that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. How about Robbie Ashford, Holden Geriner completing a combined 3 for 11 passes for 12 yards, Will?
Yeah, man.
Remember, this was against an A&M secondary who looked basura in its lone game of Power 5 competition this year against Miami. And we're thinking, okay, you might be able to make some plays. I don't know if you're going to be able to, I don't think you're going to be able to make enough plays, but you should be able to make some plays against this A&M secondary. Man, they made the forward pass look like advanced calculus.
1933 football.
Oh, it was rough. It was really rough. There were small windows to throw into. And when there were windows to throw into, usually Peyton Thorne would just miss him by like 5 yards or something. Or he would have his head down and he'd be a second away from getting sacked. How was he a second away from getting sacked that entire game? Even when he was on the sideline, I'm like, oh, Peyton Thorne's about to get sacked right now.
Seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold, like he sees the cooler, he's like, ah.
It was bad. It was really, really bad. I think that's the 3rd time that he's been benched in the last 2 seasons in a game. Because he was benched multiple times with Michigan State last year. And look,
he's like anti-Max Johnson.
Kind of, yeah. That's pretty much what he's become. I think if you're the Auburn, if you're an Auburn fan, you're looking at this passing game going, man, this is probably about what we should have expected coming into this season, knowing the limitations that were talked about on the outside at receiver. And it's not that Auburn has bad receivers. They had receivers that were getting open. Like that play, I think it was Jay Fair who was like wide open on the left sideline, and Thorne just wildly overthrows him. And you're looking going, okay, we have some options. Like Shane Hook's playing well, but there are still not enough guys who can get separation. There's not a whole lot of guys that you trust to be able to high point a football. And in this offense, if this offensive line can't pass protect and you don't have a guy that's good enough to escape that pressure, it's gonna be a rough go. I thought Freeze waited 1 series too long to bring in Robbie Ashford. Probably should have done it a little bit earlier, playing the results a little bit. Because it's like, if you're not going to be able to pass, you might as well just have Robbie Ashford's legs out there, right? Like every Auburn fan felt that watching this one. You're not moving.
That is literally been my motto all year with this team. And it's like, I know they got Peyton Thorne. I was just never really in on him. And it's just like, hey, it's like we have a no-threat quarterback and we have a singular threat quarterback, which is his legs. And I honestly think that hopefully this is kind of enough shine for Hugh Freeze to be like, all right, you know what? Like these receivers, this isn't going to work anyway. Let's run some kind of a modified like spread option with Robbie to try to because the thing about Robbie is we know that the Auburn Tigers can run the football, just period. So if you have a guy like that out there, it at least gets a defender off the running back, because Peyton Thorne's passing was not doing that.
I still think you got to go game by game for that a little bit. Maybe that sounds indecisive. I believe Freeze has the right approach to the passing game. I do. I think that's still right, despite the fact that this game was bad. It was really bad. I mean, 3.1 yards per play is what Auburn finished with on the day. That's not going to cut it. That's just yards per play. That's including the rushing, which was okay at points. But I
mean, their one touchdown was defensive. That's the best part. Is it's so much worse than even the scoreboard looks.
Eugene Asante, he's a monster. That guy is having an All-American start to the year. Great play. Oh yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that play. Jimbo Fisher standing 5 yards onto the field and somehow not getting trucked on that play was unbelievable. Unbelievable. I didn't even process it in real time, and I think I had someone tweet at me. I can't remember who it was. I apologize. But I had someone tweet at me, like, because I tweeted about Eugene Asante looking really, really good. He's like, why was Jimbo Fisher standing out of the field? I said, wait a minute, what? I have to rewind. I'm like, oh my God. That situation, of all the things that could have happened to Jimbo in that moment, watching the opposing player take it to the house is probably the best thing, right?
Yeah.
I
wonder if that's a penalty. Like if you just truck Jimbo Fisher because he shouldn't be there. Like he's out of his zone.
If you truck Jimbo Fisher, if you're the player with the football, you're good. You're good.
It's a penalty on him if you hit him.
You're within your jurisdiction. No, you're between the white lines, man. Like he could have trucked him, and it would have slowed down a little bit. So probably wouldn't have been the best thing. Don't know if he's going to the house. How quickly he runs through Jimbo Fisher would probably be a big determining factor.
What is sports science on that? Oh, how quickly can you put Jimbo Fisher in the turf and still run it to the house?
Everybody, I hope, watched that play and thought of the scene from Friday Night Lights, the show, wherein the opposing coach, who just loses his mind, hits Tim Riggins in the open field, which I watched that again about 3 or 4 times afterwards to see if I could do a side-by-side. Pretty unrealistic, I'm going to say. Pretty unrealistic to think that an opposing coach, that guy who was probably my height, he was 5'8", probably jacked up on all the pre-workout he could possibly fit into his body. But to think that guy could take down Tim Riggins with a head of steam, I don't think so.
Listen, if Muschamp hasn't done it, I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, right? Seriously. Mike Tomlin, shout out to any coach who's ever made that move while on the sideline to try and impact the game like that. But yeah, I would have paid good money to have seen almost any other result, I think. And Jimbo did the thing that was most boring in that spot. And he explained it afterwards. He thought the play was already over. He was trying to get a signal in out on the field. So that's kind of the why as to why Jimbo had wandered out on the field. I hope the internet has
like a lost child, just like with his little clipboard looking around.
We've all been there. We've all wandered into places that we know we shouldn't have been. And we think back to how cringe that was. Hey, even when you've got a buyout of $76.8 million, sometimes you just go in places where you shouldn't be. Happened to Jimbo. Got the win. If he had gotten the loss and he was on the field, internet would have had even more fun with that one.
Oh, you know what else, too? Honestly, yeah. So there was a defensive touchdown for Auburn, and there was that weird touchdown called back that was like supposed to be a defensive touchdown for A&M, where Auburn like attempted a pitch that was clearly an attempt of a pitch. Like anyone who understands football knows that was a pitch, and yet they went down to the micron and were like, no, that was a forward pass. I mean, I don't know. I'm never this guy because I hate officials, but it's like that's one where in real time you just gotta let that go because he was obviously attempting to pitch the football. His success there shouldn't determine that he gets the ball back. Messing up the play shouldn't be good. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely get that. I was surprised that they even reviewed it. And then I was like, oh, I guess the technicality of the rule, they're going to call that one back. Because that just felt like a fumble through and through in every way. And that was A&M kind of had to bounce back after it looked like Edrin Cooper had what was a scoop and score in that spot. And instead, you kind of have to figure some things out. But A&M able to put together a performance that could have been much worse. I just think could have been much worse if you had told any A&M fan, hey, Conner Weigman's going to be pretty ineffective to start off this game, and he's going to go down with an injury backed up in his own end zone after taking a hit. I think A&M fans would have been like, oh, God, we're going to lose to Hugh Freeze. Loss number 2 in the season's coming. But that was never really in doubt for this team. Okay, South Carolina holds on for dear life. Shane Beamer said afterwards that this took years off of his life. Holds on in a shootout against Mississippi State. If you had let Tulu Griffin and Xavier Legette face off against these secondaries every week, I think they'd have 3,000-yard seasons. I think they would.
Yeah.
Those guys, man, they had a field day. They ran all over the place. They were just that dominant going back and forth. Will Rogers, Spencer Rattler were both really dialed in. Dialed in. They combined for 775 passing yards. Good to see a bounce back for Will Rogers after what was easily the worst start of his career. I'm not saying that you're out of the woods for your Kevin Barbay love in the preseason, but it looked.
This is what I imagined, honestly. Just like a little, and like I mean, obviously you don't have to go all the other. You don't have to go all the way in the opposite direction and completely kind of abandon the running game. But at the end of the day, if it's ineffective, which it was against LSU, you can just lean on Will Rogers. And it looks like, yeah, they definitely did yesterday.
there were a lot. They kept talking about this on the broadcast, and it was a good point. He looked a lot more confident. When you're throwing the ball with that kind of velocity, Cole brought this up, you are showing that you are more comfortable in the system. And Will Rogers did not look comfortable in this system in that blowout loss to LSU and looked a lot more settled in. Probably the competition had a little bit to do with that. Just a little bit to do with that.
LSU's staunch defensive backs really really held him accountable.
Yeah, I think running for his life against Harold Perkins in that front probably impacted him a little bit different. Not exactly your guy that you're going to be having in those off-platform spots, but I was glad for Will Rogers that he was able to at least kind of stretch the field a little bit. I've always said he doesn't have a noodle arm. He can make those throws. He can make enough of those throws. He's never really been asked to, obviously, in the Mike Leach air raid. He can make enough. He's not going to wow you in that way, but there's still a certain threshold that I think he meets as a starting quarterback in this conference where you're not going to be like, oh, he's not going to throw it more than 30 yards. He had a couple of those plays in this one. But Spencer Rattler, I'm glad that we were ahead of this. He is totally dialed in, playing the best football of his career. He is.
Yep, he's having fun.
He is. Are we doing the Bo Nix line with Spencer Rattler?
Bo Nix, yeah. He's so back. I'm so happy to see Bo playing well. Anyway.
He is playing well. Spencer Rattler completed his first 17 passes in this one. Only 2 incompletions on the night. Well, maybe a DPI on that one that was uncalled. That was his first incompletion of the night. But for a guy that, we talked about this with KJ, for a guy with major offensive line issues, and oh, by the way, his top target is out. Juice Wells, TBD on when he's coming back. Spencer Rattler looks so comfortable. He looks like a guy who has figured things out. Dowell Loggins has done such a great job with him in this offense. The play calling is so much better than what it was with Marcus Satterfield. And we questioned that after the way that things kicked off against UNC. And it looks like, at least against maybe lesser competition, they are figuring some things out in that area. Dowell Loggins kind of had a nice moment in the post-game interview with Spencer Rattler where he joins him. And you could tell that relationship is there. That trust is there. That's what you needed to see, I think, to be like, okay, Spencer Rattler is going to be somebody that is worthy of leading this team. And he is actually going to be the strength of this team, because I thought for a lot of last season, no, you wouldn't say that Spencer Rattler was a strength of South Carolina's team. And he has absolutely become that. And all the things I had heard from that program in the offseason, all the confidence that they had internally in him so far, in my opinion, it looks justified. You see the improvement that he has with the footwork. So many of those bad habits where he's drifting, or he's thinking that his arm is going to do all the work. He's looking down. A lot of those bad habits look like they are a thing of the past, in my opinion. I've just been really, really impressed by him, and Xavier Legette too. That's a guy that, man, we've talked about that last year, about how up until that A&M kick return, he was nothing in that offense. Didn't have a role, really. And to see him become one of the best receivers in the SEC, at least through 4 weeks, what a revelation that has been. 37.8 yards per catch in this game.
Whew. Whew.
That is
a bad man right there.
Did you see that play that it was a little crosser over the middle, that he just splits the defense and he runs away from them? And you're looking at, if you look at the replay of this, look at the strides that guy is taking. Like, this is a freaking gazelle out there, the things that he is doing. He looks like somebody that has flipped a switch. And, why is he able to make a play like that? It's because Spencer Rattler is on target, and he's reading the linebacker, and he's waiting for him to get to that right spot where he knows that just when he's about to break that route upfield, he needs to hit him right in the numbers. And boom, that's exactly what he does in that spot. We knew that it was going to be a really nice matchup for Xavier Legette after what Malik Neighbors did to that Mississippi State secondary last week. That was confirmed. A bit alarming, Mississippi State, despite the good vibes that you had on offense in this one. Maybe not as good with Woody Marks kind of getting banged up. He came back in, but good vibes to see Will Rogers doing what he was doing. Not so good. Their last 3 games, been their only 3 games against Power 5 quarterbacks, right? They have allowed teams to complete 80% of their passes, Will.
I was about to say, I was like, dang, Spencer Rattler, how close did he get to what Jayden did? Because, he's 18 for 20.
Jayden set the LSU record with 30-34 completion percentage, and then Spencer Rattler starts off with 17 incompletions. Something ain't working. Something ain't working. We respect the 3-3-5. We do. But that's bad news bears. And
Notre Dame trying out that 2-3-5.
10 guys on the field. I was thinking about that earlier. Marcus Freeman's he's still kind of in the honeymoon phase where he can get away with saying something like that for having 10 guys on the field for the last play of the game. I was thinking about some of the guys who would have a really, really tough time stomaching that. Probably 80% of the coaches in the SEC, that would be an inexcusable thing that we would talk about for a very long time.
Very long time. Yep.
Marcus Freeman gets, and I'm sure Notre Dame fans are really upset, but nationally, he's probably not going to get blasted in the way that so many others would. Or like if Jimbo did something like that, or if Brian Kelly
did that, it would be open season. Yeah.
If Brian Kelly did something like that, forget about it. Forget about it. If Brian Kelly did something like that at Notre Dame, people would be freaking out on him, saying, "Oh my God, this guy's never going to win a big game." What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Jalen Milroe against this Mississippi State secondary. Nice matchup. Nice matchup for the Bama passing game to be able to kind of get them going and potentially build on what they did for a group of receivers that I think are still figuring things out. That is on the Bama side. As for South Carolina, good to get on the board in SEC play. See your quarterback play at a really high level. This is what you could have hoped for. Also good. Mario Anderson might be what they need at running back. You're not going to be impressed looking at the box score. Carried the ball 26 times for 88 yards. It was kind of a 1995 performance from the South Carolina backfield and kind of who he is, a Division II transfer, but had a nice play in this one where the offensive line just kind of rallied behind him and pushed the pile forward into the end zone. They need anything at this point because they had the worst rushing attack in Power 5 coming into this one. It's still probably going to be Basura moving forward. But you need a guy.
Spencer Rattler, man. I mean, yeah, we saw such a great response from KJ, Spencer, and Will Rogers Saturday, which I think we all love to see. But yeah, I think that the KJ comparison is spot on because it's like, man, you got like no run game because Rocket was out for KJ. You're like, yeah, luckily he has Leggett, but man, yeah, it's been tough sledding for like anything but him so far.
Yeah, man. If they could just have a guy, if Mario Anderson could just be a guy that they can give the ball to 15 to 20 times in the game, just give Rattler a break so he's not throwing 40 times. Because I still think Rattler's probably going to have one or two of those moments over the course of the game where he's going to throw an interceptable pass. And that part of his game is probably always going to be there because of the circumstances, knowing what he's up against, knowing that they're still having struggles on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to come. But all in all, for South Carolina, you're happy to get on the board in the SEC play. Up next for South Carolina, that offense, the place where it all took off last year, or I should say the defense where it all took off last year, rematch against Tennessee. Can't wait for that one. Cannot wait. That's not going to get talked about nationally, but I'm really looking forward to the South Carolina-Tennessee rematch. Okay, a game that I'm sure outside of these fan bases, I don't know, 15 people watched, maybe, something like that. Kentucky, Vandy, let's rip through this. Is it possible to think that an offense was super underwhelming while scoring 45 points?
We're about to find out.
2 pick sixes, by the way, from Maxwell Harrison. Glad that we shouted him out in the preview pod. Breakout star in that Mark Stoops defense. They were one step ahead all day. They really were. That's the good news if you're a Kentucky fan is we're seeing the household names emerge. Like Deion Walker he is just a monster up front, the things that he's doing. And you've got a true lockdown corner in Harrison. Perfect example of a guy who we're like, hey, who are the household names going to be on Kentucky? Yeah, they'll probably figure it out. Yep, he's the guy who's figuring it out and becoming a star for them. But I just did not like that game from the Kentucky offense. I did not. The offensive line is improved, not by that much, at least not yet. I still think Devin Leary's getting hit too much. I don't think they're creating big enough running lanes. Leary had a really, really bad pick deep in his own territory in a 24-10 game where you're like, man, you need to put together a scoring drive and put this game away. And instead, after they get off to that great start, go up 21-0, he throws that pick. And Kentucky's offense was fortunate that it only turned into a Vandy field goal, and it ended up being like not that big of a play, but still, even probably the biggest highlight of the day for Kentucky, a really pretty ball from Devin Leary to Dane Key. And Dane Key makes this awesome catch, high pointing the football in the end zone. And then he does one of the more disrespectful things that you can do after scoring a touchdown. He taps the DB right on the head. Says like, they're there. Small.
They're there.
Instant flag. Needless to say, Mark Stoops did not applaud that move. Wasn't a fan of that. It's like, which just speaks to some of the things that you hear about Dane Key and Barry and Brown are that, look, tremendously talented players. The maturity, the day in, day out stuff, they're still figuring that out. And I think the reliance on those two guys sometimes, you see why the peaks and valleys are there for this Kentucky offense. And I think right now, despite the fact that they're 4-0 with a comfortable road victory, you avenged last year's loss. That's the good. But I think Kentucky fans are frustrated because they know what's ready for them on the latter half of that schedule. It is really, really difficult. That daunting 5-game stretch to end the season. I just don't think this offense has an identity yet. It is this entire team is just constantly waiting for a chunk play that doesn't always happen, or a huge defensive turnover to flip the momentum. That's kind of what Kentucky has been through the first 4 weeks of the season. But yeah, like, I realize if you just looked at the box score of this one, you might say, hey, easy. Like, what are you talking about? But I think anybody that's watched this team closely in these noon slots, you probably haven't been that impressed, and you can understand why Mark Stoops is frustrated. If I picked Kentucky to finish second East, I would not feel great about that right now. I just wouldn't.
Okay, well, let me ask you this question. So maybe like Mark Stoops has like a little bit of that Bane element where like everybody else just adopted the dark. He was born in it. Like, how bad is this offense on scale of Kentucky offenses? Because we've seen 2 pretty bad Kentucky offenses win 10 games.
The difference is that those offenses were not as turnover prone. And look, no, the offense that they had 2 years ago in year one
with Levis, that was actually a good offense. But I was thinking about the other one. Yeah.
I mean, they had their best offense since 2007 that year. So I would, by the Kentucky standard, whatever the standard is, it was a really good offense. But the 2018 offense is different because you had an identity with Benny Snell, with our favorite neighbor Terry Wilson, with Lynn Bowden on the outside as well. You had an identity. You knew the type of games that you wanted to play in. And you also didn't have an offense that turned the football over that much. I think Kentucky's turning the football over too much. And I think they're getting too far behind the sticks where they're taking deep sacks or something like that. And it doesn't really allow them to play the way that they always want to play. So that's a weird way to answer that question, because obviously there's more firepower overall in this offense. It's a better passing game. I won't dispute that. But I think there are just moments that if you look at over the course of the game, they have more of, even though they might not have the same limitations that the 2018 group did, being a pretty one-dimensional offense, they still do things to put you in a deeper hole and put you in a tougher spot. And I think that goes against what Mark Stoops has typically coached with in his career at Kentucky. But who knows? The East is kind of like the second place spot in the East. Nobody has solidified that. Mizzou, maybe looking like number 2 team in the East at this point. I don't know. We're going to find out in a couple of weeks what that looks like. Obviously, they only have Vandy next week, so I don't think that we're going to get a true answer to that question. Mizzou starting off 5-0 potentially seems very much on the table, and Kentucky, meanwhile, hosts Florida. Very interesting game. Very interesting game in the East hierarchy.
Yeah, man.
What that looks like.
Yeah, that's going to be, and that's kind of how this game. Remember last year, Kentucky was the game after Florida was ranked like 15th when they had beaten Utah, and that was the Dane Key play. So this has been a super interesting rivalry after Mullen kind of let them have that belief, because there were years where it was like same as Tennessee with Florida, where it's like it doesn't matter what you guys do, you're not going to beat them. But it's been pretty back and forth lately. So yeah, it should be a good one.
Yeah, Kentucky has won ever since they overcame, what was it? They lost like 31 in a row or 32 in a row, something like that. And then they break that streak 2018. They've won 3 out of the last 5. I mean, that's about as good as you could have hoped for if you are a Kentucky fan. Okay, let's end with some ya or nah, Will. Okay, ya or nah. Florida State should be number 1 in the AP poll ahead of Georgia.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think they probably, having Clemson unranked is a little bit goofy to me. I mean, just given how they clearly hung with the team that was number 4 and we're talking about has a couple of the best wins. But I get it. I mean, we've been all kind of trying to wait to dump on Dabo this whole time. But yeah, I think that FSU has played too close with everyone but LSU for me to feel like they're number 1.
I'm okay with it. I still, if I'm filling out an AP ballot, I don't have an AP ballot, I would still put Georgia at number 1. But I'm at this point of the season, once you hit week 4, week 5 or something like that, now is when you can actually kind of start to dig into resumes and say, oh, well, the quality of this win versus the quality of this win. It's nearly impossible to do that. Even at this stage of the season, you can get into arguments and you can kind of step on your own toes doing this. If you watched SEC final, the Ben Watts and Chris Doering back and forth that those two guys had as it related to resumes and stuff like that. And like, all right, then, well, Mizzou's undefeated. Mizzou's got a better resume than Georgia. Why don't you put Mizzou ahead of Georgia at this point? So it is still very, very subjective in that department. But I like the fact that Florida State has these 2 wins away from home, one of which neutral site, one of which obviously in a place that still Clemson had only lost once there since 2016, last year to South Carolina, of course. And that's still a really nice win, all things considered, even though they are unranked and we're dogging Clemson. I would be okay with it. I don't think you have to. What about Ohio State in that one spot? Is beating Notre Dame in South Bend? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I feel like I saw 2 teams that were a little bit. I mean, everyone's flawed this year, so there's not really been a complete team other than our Washington Huskies with former IU great Michael Penix Jr. But point being, like, there really hasn't been a complete team. But yeah, nothing. I mean, McCord made big plays when he needed to, but I think he's, like we talked about, the worst Ohio State quarterback in a minute. So yeah, I don't really think that was a proving ground for anything.
Yeah, what does it say that with the game on the line, they took the ball out of McCord's hand in that spot and ran running play?
Well, they ran into a guy who wasn't there. So now that you know that, I mean, pretty easy move.
Good point. Ohio State's defense is nasty, though. They are vastly improved. That Jim Knowles hire that Ryan Day made, Lincoln Riley could learn a thing or two about hiring the right defensive coordinator. And
they're not soft. They're physical. Anyone, any octogenarians out there, if you're listening to me, we're a physical team.
Apologize to everyone's eardrums for just hearing Will imitating Ryan Day, mocking.
He's screaming all the time.
Ryan Day, like, I don't know, man. Of all the people to call out, I just don't. Look, you're gonna get called out by Lou Holtz. I think sometimes you just let it slide. I have a surge age limit, okay? Certain age limit where if somebody over the age of 70 is calling out something that I'm doing, that's probably not the number one thing on my mind as I pick up a big resume boosting win. I don't know. That's me. I guess I'm unique. But yeah, you could throw a lot of teams in that conversation, and I don't necessarily hate it. If you want to put Ohio State there, if you are of the belief that Texas deserves that, although I don't know, probably not putting Texas at number 1, but Washington, yeah, every single time Washington comes on screen and shows. It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. They are such a fun team to watch. I watched a lot more of the opener that they had against Boise State, and man, how badly could Bama have used Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for that team? The way that he schemes guys open in space, man, it is so like Bama's passing game is at a much different place if they are able to hire that guy instead of Tommy Rees. I am a firm believer of that. It's not just that they're doing this against Pac-12. But yeah, every time Michael Penix comes on screen, I'll say to Lauren, out of what school? And she'll just go, out of Indiana.
He just like us for real.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, other Yar now. After Oregon just totally pummeled Colorado to hand Deion the first loss, which a lot of people had a lot of thoughts about. Yeah or not, Bo Nix should be your Heisman Trophy favorite at this point of the season.
Favorite? I mean, we were just talking about Michael Penix. I would put him over Bo Nix, but I'm proud that Bo Nix has advanced in this way. He's gotten out of the Gus Malzahn pyramid scheme, and it's good to see him flourishing.
How about this? Maybe this is a better question. I'll give you an option to take the Pac-12 or the field for the Heisman Trophy.
Oh, that's easy work, Pac-12, because they got Caleb Williams, too.
Got Caleb Williams, got Michael Penix.
Yeah.
I think at this point you would probably take the Pac-12. I saw a graphic that had JJ McCarthy in that conversation. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, the Pac-12 getting a team in the college football playoff and having a Heisman Trophy winner, which, look, 2014, that drought's not that long, okay? Like, we're talking about the Big Ten here. A little bit different in that regard, but yeah, Bo Nix very much a part of that conversation. I still think Penix does more impressive things, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. That just watching them, Bo Nix is making a lot more of the underneath type throws, and Oregon's doing some great things in space, and he's still such a weapon with his legs, not taking away what he's become as a player is really fun to watch. But Penix and Caleb Williams, man, like to me, it's those two are at the top. That's tier one for Heisman winners. But obviously, when you beat Colorado, it changes things, changes the conversation about you. How about Dan Lanning, man?
Yeah, I mean, so I was about to say too. I think that we're at a point I'm ready to say with the Pac-12, we should start viewing them like we viewed the SEC in previous years, where a loss or maybe even two shouldn't keep a Pac-12 team, like a single Pac-12 team, out of this playoff. Because if you look up and down the Pac-12, we're not even talking about Utah. We're not even talking about UCLA, who, I mean, obviously didn't play great yesterday, but still, they have Chip Kelly as their head coach. Like, you could look up and down the Pac-12 and see all these teams. So I think they'll probably beat each other up. But yeah, I think at least one, if not two teams, deserve it from there this year.
I didn't even include Shedeur Sanders in that conversation as well.
Yeah, he sure is in the Pac-12.
Yeah. Pac-12 definitely has a very, very favorable path to the playoff and possibly a Heisman Trophy winner. I think that about covers it. Week 4 was great. Week 4 was so fun. Week 5, only SEC games. None of this non-conference mess. Look, non-conference play is great. It serves its purpose. 7 SEC football games, SEC versus SEC. That's it next week. Really, really looking forward to it. A lot of intriguing games. We will have a ton of breakdown in the midweek pod. If you have not, just, hey, you want to do a good deed today? You're listening to this on Sunday or Monday or something like this. Do us a favor. Tell a friend. Hey, do you listen to the Saturday Down South podcast? You like college football. You should listen to the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to it. If you haven't, leave us a 5-star review. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast, which is presented by Texas Pete. Follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter, at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.